The United States and Canada are currently facing devastating economic problems. We're talking about major national debts, aging populations, lack of jobs for young people, ridiculously expensive houses, and many other things. And so, a lot of people are starting to ask the question out loud: are we watching the slow collapse of North America's two biggest economies? Are we all going to become dependent on China? And if they fall, who will fall first? This is the topic of this video, where we will compare both countries in 6 face-to-face rounds, where we will compare key declining economic trends that are currently affecting both nations and see which one is doing worse in each of them. At the end of the video, the country with the worst score will be the one predicted to collapse first. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start with round 1. Which government wastes the most of your taxes? And by that I mean, which government uses most of your taxes and produces nothing with it? We will compare both countries using the percentage of all of your taxes that goes to pay the interest on the national debt. Not roads, not hospitals, not schools, not the military, nothing but paying debt. Think of it like a household that's so deep in credit card debt that a chunk of every paycheck disappears before it can pay for groceries or rent. That's what's happening at the government level in both countries. Based on many economists, a healthy government should be keeping that number below 10% of its tax revenue, and both the US and Canada are failing this test right now. At the time of this video, roughly 19% of US federal tax revenue goes entirely to servicing interest on the national debt. This means nearly $1 in $5 collected from American taxpayers produces zero public value. It just keeps the debt from exploding faster. Canada, on the other hand, is in a bad spot too, but a noticeably less expensive one, with around 11% of all Canadian tax revenue going to debt interest payments. So both countries are failing the basic benchmark, but the US government's debt hole is significantly deeper. This gives Canada a 1-0 lead for the first round. Let's move to round 2. Which country faces the worst population collapse? While both nations have seen record immigration in the past few years, both countries are failing to reproduce themselves enough to keep the entire system healthy. For a country's population to naturally replace itself without relying on immigration, you need roughly 2.1 births per woman. Go below that, and over time, you get an aging population, fewer workers, and a shrinking tax base that has to support more and more retirees. Basically, as contradictory as it may sound, the less women make babies in the country, the more expensive it is to live in that set country over time. At the time of this video, the United States sits at a birth rate of about 1.6 births per woman, and it's been trending down for years. But Canada is in even worse shape, at around 1.3 births per woman. Both countries have leaned on immigration to paper over this gap, but immigration is not a permanent fix. It comes with its own pressures on housing, jobs, and public services, and it doesn't solve the underlying demographic problem. As ridiculous as it might sound, mishandled immigration leads to higher inflation nationwide, while inflation is one of the primary reasons young people can't make children in the first place. Can you really blame a young couple hesitating to make children when they can barely pay rent while working full-time? In any case, the win goes to America for this round, making it 1-1. And speaking of not making babies, one of the primary reasons millennials and Gen Z are avoiding making children is the collapse of the housing market in both countries, which will be the face-off of round 3. A healthy housing market is generally considered to be one where the average home price is at the worst case 4 times the average income. So, if the average worker earns $50,000 a year, a reasonably priced home should cost around $200,000 or less. That ratio keeps home ownership accessible to working people, which is a cornerstone of middle-class wealth building. But trust me, both countries blew past that benchmark a long time ago, and neither has come back down. At the time of this video, the median home sale price in the US is around $425,000, while the median income for a full-time worker is roughly $59,000. That gives you a ratio of about 7.2. This means the average American home costs more than 7 times what the average full-time worker earns in a year. That's nearly double what's considered healthy by economists. But you want to hear even worse? Simply look at the country sitting north. In Canada, the median home price is around $490,000 at the time of this video. However, the median full-time worker income in Canada is only about $50,000. That pushes Canada's ratio to roughly 9.8. You heard that correctly. Almost 10 times the average income. 10 times. I hope you understand why Canadians are not making babies now. That round obviously goes to America, giving the US a 2-to-1 lead. This now leaves us to round 4, the country with the worst collapse in the cost of living outside the housing market. We're going to compare how fast salaries are growing compared to inflation in both nations. And this is where one country pulls ahead in a way that's hard to argue with. Let's look at the numbers from roughly 2020 to the time of this video, so about a 6-year window. In the United States, average wage growth over that period has been running at a surprising rate of around 4.4% per year. Inflation over the same stretch has averaged a devastating rate of about 3.9% per year though. But that still gives American workers a real wage growth of roughly 0.5% per year. That's not great, and it certainly doesn't feel like much, especially for people who aren't in the high-earning sectors. But it's still a positive stat. It means that on average, American workers are technically earning slightly more in real terms than they were 6 years ago. Over the same period, Canadian wage growth has averaged around 3.15% per year, while inflation has averaged around 3.2% per year. That means Canada's average worker has lost real wage growth for about 0.05% per year in the past 6 years. Tiny number, but the direction matters a ton. This means that even including high earners in Canada, pretty much everyone has seen the value of their hard work disappear over the past 6 years. That gives a clear other win to America for a score of 3-to-1 over Canada now. And speaking of cost of living, if you want to start growing your savings, I suggest you use budget planners. These books make it simple for you to track your everyday expenses as well as your income, and to know exactly where you can save money every month. I personally started to save hundreds of dollars every month using them, as I realized how much money I wasted on Uber Eats. If you want to order some for yourself, I have Amazon links in the video description for different models. If you end up picking one, it will directly support the channel. Now let's move to round 5, the job market. This is one of the clearest windows into the health of an economy. When people can find work, they pay taxes, they spend money, and everything else functions better. When they can't, the whole system starts to go bust. So we're going to use unemployment numbers in this round. For many economists, a healthy unemployment rate is generally considered to be somewhere between 3 and 5%. This is low enough to show strong demand for workers, but not so low that companies can't find workers. At the time of this video, the United States is sitting at an unemployment rate of around 4.3%. That's within the healthy range. It's not booming, but it's stable. That's actually the kind of number that suggests the labor market is holding up despite everything else going on. Canada, on the other hand, is at roughly 6.9% unemployment right now. That's above the healthy range by a lot, and it's been climbing. The worst is the youth unemployment rate. In Canada, youth unemployment is running at around 14.3% at the time of this video. In the US, that same group sits at about 10.5%. And by youth unemployment, we usually talk about eligible workers at 24 and below. As you can see, both are too high, but Canada's youth job market is in noticeably worse shape. A big part of what's driving this in Canada is a mismatch between population growth and job creation. Canada brought in record numbers of immigrants over the past several years, which can sound positive, but in reality, the economy simply hasn't been able to generate enough new jobs to absorb them, which has led to people competing for a job pool that isn't growing fast enough to meet them. America now leads by 4-to-1 over Canada. Now finally, potentially the most important round of all. Which of these two countries is facing the biggest economic collapse? And to compare them, we will look at which country creates the least economic value per citizen. In other words, which country has its citizen creating the least money? To do so, we will look at GDP per capita, which indicates the value of economic output divided by the number of people in the country. Let's look at the US first. From 2016 to the time of this video in 2026, the GDP per capita in the United States has grown from around $58,000 to about $70,500 per citizen. That's a growth rate of roughly 1.8% per year on average. That's actually above the healthy benchmark of 1.5% referred by many economists. Through a pandemic, inflation, political turbulence, and multiple economic shocks, the American economy has kept producing more value per person over the past decade. It's not perfect, but still, it is growth. Canada's numbers are a different story, though. Over the same 10-year period, Canada's GDP per capita has gone from around $51,500 to about $53,000. That's a growth of roughly 0.3% per year. For an entire decade, Canada's economic output per person has barely moved. When you factor in inflation, Canada's economy has been functionally shrinking in real terms per person for years. That's not a slowdown, that's stagnation. That means yes, if you look at the entire GDP of Canada, you will see that it grew from 2016 to 2026. But that's primarily just because the population grew, not that the economy is better. So, in the end, America wins 5-1 over Canada. So yes, Americans struggle to pay their bills, their taxes are wasted on interest debts, young people can't find jobs, and the cost of buying a house keeps skyrocketing. But despite all of that, Canada is doing worse in almost everything I just named, except how much of their taxes are wasted. And so, both countries have a lot of work to do if they want to turn these trends. But when it comes to the past few years, if we have to predict a first collapse, Canada would be the winner. Obviously, this is just entertainment and not a literal prediction. Anything can happen. But if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, give it a like and subscribe. In the meantime, why not watch one of the videos showing on your screen right now? I'll see you there.